Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I had hoped this question might be answered by the First Minister, but I note she is absent from the Chamber. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the UK Supreme Court's ruling on the legality of an independence referendum bill.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you,
Robertson.
Presiding Officer. As Constitution Secretary, it is entirely appropriate for me to be answering questions about the Constitution today. First Minister's questions are tomorrow, and I'll wait to see if Douglas Ross has any better questions then. In answer to the substantive question before us this afternoon, Presiding Officer, the Supreme Court has decided that under the devolution settlement, a referendum on the question, should Scotland be an independent country, is a matter reserved to the Westminster Parliament. This means that without an agreement between the Scottish and UK governments and the Scottish and UK parliaments, without a Section 30 order or a UK Act to change the Scottish Parliament's powers, the Scottish Parliament cannot pass the laws required to hold a referendum to give effect to the mandate that people in Scotland gave it and to give us a choice about our future. The first thing I want to say is this. The Scottish Government accepts and respects this judgment. The Supreme Court was not asked to decide and cannot decide whether the Scottish Parliament should have the power to hold an independence referendum. Its job is to set out what the law is, in this case the devolution settlement in the Scotland Act 1998, and that is what it has done. The judgment makes clear how the UK Constitution gives the UK Government a veto over people in Scotland's right to choose. The Supreme Court said, in paragraph 81, a clear outcome, whichever way the question was answered, would possess the authority in a constitution and political culture founded upon democracy of a democratic expression of the view of the Scottish electorate. That is what these constitutional arrangements deny us, a democratic expression of the view of the Scottish electorate. Why does this matter, Presiding Officer? The Supreme Court tells us that the question is whether Scotland should cease to be subject to the sovereignty of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. So the reason that the Scottish electorate does not get its chance to offer a democratic expression is because it would impinge on Westminster sovereignty if their views were known. That tells us what is truly left of promises made that the UK would operate as a partnership of equals, or that we lived in a voluntary union of nations. No matter how the people of Scotland vote, or how often they elect parliaments that support a referendum or support independence, they cannot be told no by the UK Prime Minister. This cannot be right, and there are few stronger or more powerful arguments for independence than that. In a voluntary union, one part doesn't have to rely on the agreement of another before it is allowed to even think about leaving.
Cabinet Secretary. Thank you. I would be grateful if you could draw that particular response to a conclusion, as there's a great deal of interest in this item. Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I noted the Cabinet Secretary quoted paragraph 81 of the ruling, not paragraph 82, where the judges said they were in absolutely no doubt as to the answer to the question that they were looking at. But given the cost of this case, in taxpayers' money and time, I do think it's regrettable that the First Minister herself was unable to come to this chamber to answer. She was more than happy this morning to comment from behind an SNP podium as SNP leader, but she is now unwilling to answer questions today in this chamber from elected Scottish parliamentarians as First Minister. The Scottish people have made it clear, in poll after poll, that they do not want another referendum next year.
Members.
So I welcome.
Members.
So I do welcome the Supreme Court's clear and unanimous judgment, and it is one that we all must respect, and I hope the SNP backbenchers here do as well. But we now have an opportunity, Cabinet Secretary, to focus on the big challenges Scotland faces right now. Strikes, the global cost of living crisis and a winter storm in our NHS. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, will the SNP government ditch their referendum obsession and get back to tackling these crucial issues for individuals, families and communities right across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
The inconvenient truth for Douglas Ross is that last year's Scottish Parliament election decided the principle and the electorate decided the mandate, and it was for parties in favour of an independence referendum. It was the SNP and the Greens that won the election. It was the Scottish Conservatives that lost the election.
I think this session will be a lot more productive if we can hear whoever is on their feet speaking. I'd be grateful if members could please resist any temptation to contribute while members are on their feet. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The position of the Scottish Government remains the same as the First Minister announced to this Parliament on the 28th of June. Nothing in this respect has changed. We would prefer the UK and the Scottish Governments to agree a Section 30 order under the Scotland Act to allow a legal and constitutional referendum to go ahead. That is what the people have voted for. It's for the Scottish Conservatives to explain why they are blocking and why they are denying democracy.
Douglas Ross.
Well, I think it's for the Cabinet Secretary to explain his misleading claim there, because actually a majority of votes in the Scottish Parliament election were for parties that support remaining part of the United Kingdom, more than parties who support separation. But let's be very clear. The SNP's political obsession with separation dragged both of Scotland's governments into court. But there is now a chance for Scotland and our two governments to come together and move on. So there is a clear choice for this SNP government. Either they continue to divide our country and focus on their political priorities, or they can get on with the job of dealing with the real priorities for Scottish people. So, Cabinet Secretary, what choice will this government make? Will it keep pushing for another referendum, or will it focus on getting back to work to deliver for the people of Scotland? Which will it be?
Cabinet Secretary.
What I can say with absolute certainty, Presiding Officer, is my memory is long enough to realise that it was the Conservative Party that blocked Scottish democracy and devolution after the yes vote of 1979. I am long enough to remember that it was the Conservative Party that opposed devolution in the 1997 referendum, so perhaps it's unsurprising that they are not keen on Scottish democracy now. Blocking and denying democracy is a serious charge, and Douglas Ross and the Tories are unfortunately leading the charge.